Welcome to Twin Cities PBS. We're so excited to have you here today. How many of you have been to TPT before? Raise your hand if you have. Some of you work here, so that's okay. Okay. Welcome to everyone. If you've been here before, if not, we're so thrilled to have everybody here. My name is Maribel Lopez, and I'm the director of rewire.org, which is a website that's produced out of TPT. And it's intended for young adults, so we're trying to reimagine what public media could be like for a new generation. And we'll be down the hall in the atrium during the day, so in between sessions, if you have a chance to come by and say hi to us and other people from TPT, we'd love to connect with you. One of the main things that we do here at TPT and on Rewire is tell stories. And we enjoy making connections in the community and doing stuff like events like these. And I think a lot of people don't really know all of the different facets of what makes up our public television station here in the community. So another reason why we're so thrilled to have so many of you who haven't been here before, so thank you for coming. And TPT has worked with Glitch in a number of different capacities, and it's so cool because the work that they do is incredibly important, and it just really vibes with a lot of what we believe in as an organization, to both TPT and Rewire. And so I'm really pleased that we, thanks to some support from the Knight Foundation, had the opportunity to help put on this incredible annual event known as GlitchCon and have it here at TPT. We're just really thrilled about that. So they have an amazing day planned for you, and I am so excited to learn so much, as I'm sure you all are. So I won't keep you any longer, but I want to get their fabulous leader up here. Her name's Ava Crackle. I've had such a pleasure getting to know her and all about Glitch and their awesome team. So from all of us at TPT and at Rewire, welcome to our home. Have a great day.
Hey everybody, how are you all doing on a Tuesday afternoon? Yeah? How many of you have been here before, well not here specifically, but at GlitchCon before, typically on a weekend? Yeah, okay, cool. Well, that seems like a good handful of folks are actually new to us, and thank you for joining us on a weekday. My name is Ava Kreikel. I'm the founder and also creative director here at Glitch. I'm going to be sharing a little bit about our keynote here that we're going to meet in just a second. I've had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with Freya Holmer, and she's a wonderful, brilliant human, and I'm so excited for you to hear a little bit of what she has to say. So Freya Holmer is the co-founder of Neat Corporation, the studio behind the groundbreaking VR title, Budget Cuts. She's also the creator of Shader Forge, which is a shader creation tool for Unity. Driven by an intense curiosity, she frequently deep dives into vastly different fields of the expertise, covering a full spectrum of game development, from coding, modeling, tech, and art, to design and audio, and she also fields such fields as music production as well. She also actually does some web design, technology, teaching, and also photography. My goodness, there's a lot that she does. And I think this really hits on our theme this year of intergalactic, where she describes herself as comfortably lost in this digital space. So if you could all help me welcome her to the stage, everybody, Freya Holmer.
All right, I am tall. Hello, everyone. All right, I am not an expert in any of those fields, just so I'm not an authority in those. Just a heads up. All right, so can you hear me well, everyone? Is the audio fine? Super. All right, so first off, I am honored to be here with you all. Thank you so much for the staff and organizers for making this happen. And thank all of you for coming here. So I never expected to be invited to do a keynote. I'm just trying to imagine how many other keynote speakers declined before you got all the way down to me. But anyway, you're stuck with me now, so let's make the best of it. All right, I am Freya Holmer. I am the co-founder and technical artist at Neat Corporation. It's our studio in Stockholm, Sweden. So we have been working on our VR stealth game called Budget Cuts. It's kind of like a first-person stealth thing. All right, so feel free to check that out if you're into VR. It's released on Steam and Oculus Home, so yeah. Anyway, a few years before that, I created ShaderForge, which is a node-based shader editor for Unity. It's now free and open source, so if you want to dig into it, you can go visit it on GitHub. I would warn you though, I was the sole developer in this project, and the code was not written for anybody else in mind. So, you know, it was not written for people to understand it, and not even my future self, it turns out. So be careful, and please don't judge me. All right. So what am I going to talk about today? So I've never done a keynote before. This is very much outside of what I normally do. It's in many ways similar, but also very different from the more like technical, in-depth talks I've done. So I hear the keynotes are supposed to be a bit more inspirational, to open events and set the mood. But I realized a bit too late that what I'm about to talk about is pretty dark. So this talk is very reflective and not necessarily directly applicable to all of you. But I hope it will at least be interesting to listen to. If not, feel free to turn on your phones and go on Twitter or something. All right, so we often talk about what, where, and how we learn things in the external space. Things like coding, game design, and 3D art, music, and writing. But there's another space we don't talk too often about, which is the inner space of your mind. So the inner space is quite different, because each of our minds are pretty unique, and it's very hard for other people to help you out with learning that space. So, with that in mind, pun intended, I'm going to talk about some of the problems I had growing up that I've never talked about publicly before, because it's a very difficult subject matter, and to a very large extent, something most people can and probably should keep to themselves to protect their own reputation. So, just to preface this, I am not an expert in psychology at all. So please know that this entire talk is just, my unqualified reflections on my personal experience. I'm going to talk on mental health struggles and how I managed to overcome, or at least work with it instead of against it. And mental health has sort of become, much more commonly talked about in these creative spaces, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Because many people in our line of work do suffer from many mental health issues that they might not have been comfortable talking about before. But most of these problems generally garner a sympathetic response. They feel sorry for the person suffering from things such as anxiety or depression, and genuinely hoping that they can find find ways to one day be rid of it. But the mental problems I've had are of a different category. It's of a category that can make people feel disdain and, mistrust and sometimes outright hostility. So I'm honestly pretty scared of what you're going to think of me after this. But I do want to broaden the types of conversations we have about mental health. For people who may have felt the same but feel like they don't have the space to talk about them. So, and what's worse, in our society, the smart thing to do is often not to talk about it. Because, just as a means of survival or out of fear of being rejected. So, this is about narcissism and borderline psychopathic tendencies. So, what I've learned in dealing with all of this can be of value to anyone interested in learning both about themselves, others, and the process of learning as a whole. But, so I guess all I'm saying is please don't leave halfway through or you're guaranteed to think I'm a psychopath. So, all right. So when I grew up, I had pretty bad grades in school. I generally had a hard time focusing. Now, it was not only that I didn't care about many classes, I almost couldn't care about them. I could barely focus, my mind kept wandering, and even with repeated conscious efforts to focus on the task at hand, I would drift off to think of, what I would do once I got back home to my computer, to what I would work on next on my Team Fortress 2 level. And this lack of focus on things I considered irrelevant also heavily affected my memory. I had a very hard time remembering irrelevant things, or at least things I considered to be irrelevant. So my mind was gatekeeping absolutely everything, which also had social implications. So, for instance, still to this day, in my family, I only know the birthday of my sister. I don't know the birthday of my parents, because my mind is just like, I don't need to know this. This is just irrelevant information, and Facebook keeps track of this for me. And also in social situations, people could sometimes tell that I didn't care. So when they were talking about things that I, had no interest in, so in situations like this, reasonably nice people tend to listen, but regardless of their interest in the situation. But I had trouble doing this, even though I tried, and whenever I tried, it felt fake, like I was just pretending to care instead of actually caring. So I used to look at this problem in a positive light, as some form of genuine honesty, where I never wanted to pretend to like something I didn't. So being honest and upfront about it felt to me like a nice and open gesture to the other person. That would hopefully lead to more honest and better interactions in the future with this person. Because in my perspective, I had now given them feedback on how boring I found them to be. But as I grew older, I also realized that I completely ignored what the other person thinks of this. And it's both short-sighted as well as very selfish. You easily come off as being stoic and not very exciting to hang around with, because you don't respond to much input. You just seem preoccupied with your own things, which I was. And this is what I began to realize. I began learning how to work around this and think more long-term. I started getting used to being able to focus on things that weren't interesting to me, which, after all, is a very useful skill to have. So, this is probably going to sound borderline psychopathic, creepy, and analytical, but this is truly how I've at least personally dealt with situations like this in the past. So to illustrate, imagine I'm in a social situations, and a group of friends are talking about something that I, on a shallow level, very much don't care about. Now, I now listen, and some of the reasons I now listen is not because I care about the things they're saying, but because I care about remaining friends with these people, because they do, after all, benefit me long term. And I listen because I want other people to see that I'm listening, and make them feel like I probably give them a chance. I want them to see me as a nice person, which is a mutual benefit. I am genuinely open to the fact that they might say something new or unexpected, and I wouldn't want to miss that because it might be interesting or valuable information. And the odds of me being able to join a conversation is greater if I keep track of what they're saying, and I might be able to talk about it in a way that I do find interesting, which is likely more valuable than not listening at all. And also if somebody asks me a question suddenly about something that I didn't listen to, then they become aware of the fact that I didn't listen, which in turn makes me look like a bad friend who just doesn't care. So this whole problem of not caring and listening properly would also spill over into romantic relationships. I generally had a very hard time saying I love you, because after saying it once, they already knew that I did. And it felt pointless to say it again. But even though I knew the other person wanted me to say it more often, and that this would make them happy, I almost couldn't say it again. Something in my mind stopped me. And it's this type of barrier that has led someone to tell me that I don't think you're capable of feeling love, which really hurts. So I was very bad at providing emotional support, and to some extent still am today. And it generally involves a lot of unsubstantiated claims and white lies, but for some reason I'm a pathological truth teller. I'm extremely averse to lying. So statements like, everything is going to be okay, turned into the less supportive, everything's probably going to be okay. And I know you can get through this, turned into, I think you can get through this. And whenever there was a situation where somebody told me, I love you more than anything in the world, I could not say the same thing back because it would be a lie. And any other response back to that is terrible. So, even though all of this was the problem, I was fully capable of giving logical support. I could remind people that they were doing great at their job, or that they have many friends who love and support them. But this is not the emotional support that many people deeply want and need. And being able to provide this was what I was lacking. So, what about my motivational issues and underperformance in school? Well, saying that I had bad grades because of motivational issues doesn't actually tell the whole story. As mentioned, I was definitely not a high performer, where grades are heavily skewed toward the high end, with many A's and B's and tapering off with maybe some C's. But that being said, though, I was not a typical low performer either, where grades are heavily skewed toward the low end. On the left-hand side with many failed classes and maybe 1 or 2 classes, I would go as high as C. But while it's true that I had very low grades in many classes, my distribution was more like this. When we had history, biology, politics, chemistry, geography, gym class, and sociology, I did not care. I got bare minimum on all of these, either E and maybe sometimes D. But I got straight A's in mathematics, programming, English, physics, digital media, and B's for art class and music. And this selective focus is exactly what I eventually figured out that I have to work with and amplify as much as I could. And I think this came to a large extent from me feeling a very strong need for achievement. Being very skilled in achieving things was for some reason very high priority for me. Whenever I created something or did something impressive, I felt validated and I suppose connected to the world. This became one of the few ways people started acting more positively toward me and making me feel appreciated, as I wasn't very good at being emotionally close otherwise. But that is putting it in very rosy terms, and I honestly don't know if it's all true. My likely stronger driver for this was probably pure narcissism. It's super embarrassing to say, but I really wanted to be famous. And back when I was in school, I wanted to be a level designer at Valve. That was, to me, the highest position I could strive for, given the communities I was involved in. And then this then grew into wanting to be famous and respected for multiple things. I wanted to be a jack of all trades, master of all. I wanted to be on Wikipedia, described as a fucking polymath. But I've also realized that this is extremely unreasonable. And the reason it's unreasonable is, of course, judging by these polymaths. You need to be a man of philosophy with a proper beard. I'm very much interested in philosophy, but being a man and having a beard are two things I'm actively working against right now. So yeah, I guess my Wikipedia page is not going to happen anymore. But even to this day, in writing these very words that I'm speaking right now to you, I can feel my brain telling me, I hope someone finally goes out and writes this page now that I put the idea out there. But I've realized that this is extremely stupid, and I now recognize that because of my introspection, that the thought is a bad intuition and should not be communicated. Obviously, I communicated it now, but you know what I mean. So people often say that you should treat yourself as well as you would treat your friends, which is a great guideline for people who may suffer from depression or anxiety, where your self-esteem is very negative, and you look up to your friends and see them as having a very high esteem. But for the more narcissistic brains like mine, it's the complete opposite, and this saying doesn't work at all. And the narcissist's self-image is too positive. They should instead be guided by a different saying, which is you should treat your friends as well as you would treat yourself. And so both of these are kind of just restatements of the golden rule, but they're weighted for people with a distorted perspective on either side. So out of curiosity, I just Googled both of these statements. The first one got around 55,300 results, and the second one found exactly 0. So I'm starting to think this might not be good advice, just a heads up. So the reason I'm telling you all of this is because the only way to get out of this is to recognize these patterns of thought and work very hard to change your behavior, communication, and output. I haven't been able to change my inner thoughts, and changing intuitions is a slow process. So this is not about changing your thoughts, but to change how you react to and read those thoughts. And after a while, you will start to intuitively suppress and deflect these thoughts, but it takes work. I think today, many people who have talked to me in real life, they would be surprised to hear these things about me, because I generally come off as a pretty stable and nice person today. But this narcissism, even though it's a very bad and near immoral tool, it is, after all, a motivator. And I think this is something you can and absolutely should work together with, and make sure the bad sides are mitigated as much as possible, and use your intuitive motivation to push you forward, both personally and professionally. And that, I think, is the positive side of it all. And I think this very aspect of motivation is rarely harnessed properly in learning today, especially when it comes to the academic approach. You can sort of think of learning as navigating a space of things to learn within any given field. So at the top, you got the fundamentals. These are the ones that are required for you to understand in order to understand the descending nodes. As you go further down, you get deeper and deeper knowledge. You can imagine your vertical position here as your skill level. So each of these nodes takes some amount of time to learn, but there's an interesting quirk here. If you're interested in learning specific nodes, these will be much easier to pick up, and they will be near frictionless compared to the other ones. So what is the academic approach to learning? Well, it's kind of like the answer to the question, I want to learn X, what tutorials would you recommend? Because then you kind of start with all fundamentals. This is kind of like a breadth-first search. So you start learning all the fundamentals at the top before you move on. So this ensures you always know the basics, right? You have true knowledge of a subject within your given skill level. And this might be good if you're the type of person who don't know what you want to do in life yet, which I've never been able to relate to, but that's like most of my friends. I don't know these people. So the positive thing with this is that the lateral movement on your given skill level is really easy. So let's say you're a coder and you're working on making some sort of CPU performance optimizations on something. Then if you need to move to work on something else, like database serialization, then assuming it's on the same skill level, you can just make that jump, and it's really easy. So you really have a broad skill set. But the downside of doing this is that it's very ineffective, because every node takes a certain amount of time to learn, and as you move to the next level, there's even more nodes that you need to learn, and all of this takes so much time and sometimes money, and especially if you're learning all of this in your spare time. And it doesn't cater to your interests at all. You have all of these nodes that are really easy to pick up, and you're really fast at learning these things, but then you have to learn all of these other things. Just take a lot of time. So another example of navigating this space is the naive depth-first approach, which is kind of, oh sorry, I skipped a few slides, there we go. So this is the naive approach, where somebody says, I'm going to make an MMORPG, even though they've never made a game before. So depth first is basically you pick some location that seems interesting, and then you go straight down. So the good thing about doing this is that it's playing in the hands of your interests. You're actually really excited about making this MMO, so you're really excited to get into this, and learning these things are pretty easy. But the problem here is that lateral moves are really hard, because most of these nodes have upward dependencies that are not just directly above them. So the problem is that because you haven't looked into the fundamentals of every node, it makes it really hard to just laterally move to a different node and learn and do that thing. So you tend to get stuck at some point, because there are a lot of dependencies here. So basically, if you look at these, they sort of have a tree-like connection. So whenever you reach a node that has a lot of parent nodes, the amount of information you need to learn in order to understand that node is overwhelming, because you've just been going straight down. So, and then worst of all is vertical skipping. That is when you jump over a node and try to go directly to your end goal without knowing even the most, the closely related thing you have to know in order to understand that node. So vertical skipping is kind of like the classic asset store situation. I don't know if you're aware of the Unity asset store. How many of you are aware of that? All right, cool. So it's basically a place you can go to download pre-made packages for games generally. So let's say you have somebody who's new to making games, but they really want to make an FPS game. So they go to the asset store, they download the pro-military testosterone thing, and then that gives them a basic character setup where they have mouse look, they can move around with a keyboard, and they have all of that set up. So they just drop that into the scene with a cube as a ground or something. And then they want to make a health pack. So they download, they put a health pack mesh in the scene. They download a health pack mesh from the asset store, and they just drag and drop it into the scene, and they're like, all right, great, health pack. They don't really know how to code, but they did watch some tutorial about variables. So they write a script that's basically I'm going to make a pickup script. I define a health variable, and then I increase it by 50. And then they're like, all right, that looks like a finished health script. And then they go to the forums and ask, why does this not work? So clearly, they missed a lot of fundamentals in so many different things there. So they don't know interactions with scripts, how colliders work, how triggers work, none of this, right? So this is very common for impatient people starting out. But again, the positive side of this is that they're very excited to do these things. So I think there's another way of doing this, which is the way that I tend to approach learning. And that is learning by interest, depth first, with dependency checking. So I'd like to call it pathologically hedonistic goal-oriented learning. So I don't know if that's a good title, but to me, this is best of both worlds. It is depth first. You do go straight down the path you're interested in, but you also check for dependencies. So you always make sure that the thing you're learning is actually also includes all of the fundamentals for that very thing. So then once you've learned all of those, you actually do have knowledge about the thing that you're working on. And this saves a lot of time because you're interested in it. You exploit your selfish drive because you really do care more about your own things and things you're interested in. And your brain will reward you for doing this. And this is close to what learning by doing means. Because by actually doing something, you're often forced to deal with the upward dependencies. And quite often, just learning the theory of a node doesn't help you see the dependencies that you need in practice. But I would also go one step further. It's not just about what you learn, but also don't learn what you don't need. We have limited brain power. So I would say that the biggest downside, though, is that you can't always answer questions people assume you already know. So, for example, I have no idea what a dependency injection is. If you're a coder, you would be like, wait, what? Don't you know that? That's part of the fundamentals, right? So academic coders tend to already know this. It's part of the things that you should know. So they're apparently part of something called the solid fundamentals. No idea what that is, but it's apparently some sort of list of fundamentals that make a funny acronym. And dependency injection is at the bottom there. So I guess like in this list, I think I sort of know what the first one is and the last one, but the other ones, I don't know. Like I've been making games for like, I don't know, 9 years and 7 years professionally, and I haven't needed this, right? Because it was never part of my dependency tree. So perception is a bit of a problem. Because people think you did this. They think you learned everything. They think you did breadth first, but you totally didn't. So, when somebody asks you about a fundamental thing outside of what you've learned, such as in my case with dependency injection, it kind of makes you look like the I want to make an MMO type of person, because you have huge gaps in your knowledge. But the difference is you actually made the MMO in the end. So I'm coming from the perspective of learning within game development. And game development is an extremely wide subject matter. And each individual field, such as concept art, programming, audio design, level design, game design, character art, UX, user testing, they're all extremely deep. And learning every single thing is kind of impossible due to the immense amount of time it would take. So this is why I'm very much against the academic type of approach to learning when it comes to game development. So I think everyone in here knows the struggle between what you want to do versus what you need to do, and just how much less resistance there is when these two align. We do have a lot of bad intuitions though, so being able to work against them is an extremely important skill to have, such as controlling dangerous impulses like anger in situations where you know it would only make things worse. But intuitions can make things near frictionless, pushing you forward faster than you've ever gone before. So, for example, I think most of us in here know how fun it is to work on a personal project and how much less fun it is to do chores. So when it comes to doing chores, you can use this method here too to make things easier and more motivating to you. So for me, whether I'm doing dishes, cleaning the house, doing makeup, or even showering, I turn them into explorations in psychology, philosophy, and morality because I listen to audiobooks. So I recommend getting wireless headphones in case you don't have that. Makes for better mobility. Turns out mine were not as shower-proof as I had hoped. So during my year of studying game design, we had several courses that I wanted to accelerate my own learning in. We had a course in UI design in which the assignment was to pick an existing game and then analyze the main menu design and think about some of the decisions they may have made during the development of that one. So I asked my teacher if I could instead design my own main menu for an indie game I was working on already. So that way I could both be part of learning UI design, but also to further my own interests, which in turn made me more interested, and the learning process, again, was accelerated and made more frictionless. So another example was a level design course, in which we were supposed to use Google SketchUp to design a single-player level. I was never too interested in learning SketchUp, but I was interested in learning Maya, another 3D modeling application. because this was something we didn't focus much on in our game design class. So I asked my teacher if I could use Maya instead, and they were fine with that. So then I learned Maya, as well as did the assignment for the level design course at the same time, which again was a great motivator. It helped me go deeper. So you can also do this in reverse. So you don't have to find ways to integrate, your project into the thing you want to learn. You can also integrate the thing you want to learn into your project. So let's say you have to learn something as useless as like sorting algorithms. So you can probably think of a way of integrating this into something you've already been working on. So in case you have a game with a high score list or something, you could sort it by learning and implementing these ridiculously complex sorting algorithms to have that useless gain in performance. But then at least you're learning it in an environment you're interested in. So in order for you to enable your brain processing unit, the BPU acceleration, say, you need to get to know your brain and find out what you actually want and what actually drives you. For instance, if you've realized that if you're working on your own game project and you probably wouldn't want to release it without crediting yourself, then you do have a bit of a narcissistic reason for doing it, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Just make sure that your name is there and seen, and it'll truly help you drive forward, because that's what your brain wants, and it doesn't hurt anyone else. And all of this is about honestly getting to know yourself. I've certainly realized more than just one thing about myself lately that I had been denying all my life. If there's one thing I want you to take away from all of this, is that I truly believe knowledge is not always external. You can be introspectively uninformed. So looking into every corner of your own mind, no matter how difficult, no matter how dark, will allow you to leverage things and guide yourself in ways that will help you learn and reach the goals you have in life, both personally and professionally. So I might be over dramatizing this, I might be over pathologizing this, but I am not a psychopath. I genuinely do care about other people, or at least so I say. Maybe I'm just doing it because caring and being nice makes people like me, but then that also makes me wonder, is there really much of a difference? I probably wouldn't even fall into the category of a narcissist today, and definitely not a psychopath. I'm likely somewhere on the autism spectrum, and perhaps a mild form of ADD, but I've never been diagnosed, and it's not something I'm medically treating, because it doesn't seem to be much of a problem for me today. It certainly could have been worse had I not done the introspective journey that I did. But I think it's easy to focus too much on labeling issues. But in the end, these are just labels to simplify descriptions of behaviors. They're just tools to simplify the process of communicating these problems. And I think introspection can take you very far, regardless of label. Well, unless you're in the deep end and need professional help, of course. So I'm not alone in having these narcissistic thoughts. I think many people harbor similar thought patterns, but don't express them simply because it's not strategic, and sometimes because you're not even aware that you're driven by these thoughts. We're probably all pretty selfish to varying extents, and I think we should be careful not to cast narcissism in too much of a bad light, because, again, it's a motivator. So this is not about giving into your impulses, blindly pursuing your interests. This is making sure that the thing you're pursuing is or can be of your interest, even without you being aware of it. It's not about convincing yourself about something that's not true. It's just deeper introspection on what you want and a clever rearrangement of the process of learning to combine the goal that you need with the goal that you want. So our brains give us a lot of thoughts and impulses that are not always good for us. But the thoughts do trigger chemical reactions in our bodies. We release adrenaline, serotonin, and dopamine depending on what's going on. And these are powerful substances that can be used for good, even when coming from what we would consider a bad place, such as narcissism. And I think if all of our stories are told through purely this external space of knowledge, I think chances are that many people will find these stories predictable. But I would say it's our quirks and obscure interests and deviating personalities of our inner spaces that is part of what makes us interesting, and allow us to tell unique stories that catch people off guard, to present them a new experience they didn't know possible. So we are not slaves to our subconscious thoughts, but our subconscious thoughts do drive us. And we can fight it all we want, but there is a middle ground to walk that can actually help us all. Thank you.